All right, welcome back to another episode of the How to Get a Job podcast. Today we have Dominic Brocco. He is a CEO and career coach, executive career coach at Career Domain. And today we're going to be talking about how to get a job in this job market. Dominic, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Dominic, man, super excited with both from Orlando, Florida, and love geeking out about how to get a job. So, hey, tell us a little bit more about your background and your journey to building. Why HR? Why recruiting? Why are you so passionate about helping people land jobs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel. I would say I'm so passionate about it because I've also been there as a high performer and a job seeker myself. My background originally was with engineering. I worked at Disney in Orlando and realized throughout my career that maybe that wasn't always the best fit. And that's kind of just like, what I grew up believing. And so ever since then, I've also been able to pivot into the tech industry, ultimately landing a job at ZipRecruiter during COVID. So that's really where I got to kind of learn the back end of how the modern job hunt really works. And ever since then, I've also been really into helping others understand that and coaching them through it.
Dominic, what would you say is the biggest misunderstanding or false belief that job seekers think about the job search process, or maybe that in reality, if they knew this, it would make it so much easier for them to actually land a job?
I think what they stress about more than they need to is their resume, because I think there's a lot of content out there about hey, you have to put in these certain keywords. You need to tailor it to an ATS. It's getting auto filtered out. Probably 9 times out of 10, that's not happening. It's still a human that's reading your experience. So making sure you're positioned for the roles that you actually have experience for and applying to them is more important than trying to game the system.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always think about this, that the resume is the most biased document in the world because it's all of the good things you've ever done in your life and none of the bad. And I think job seekers I think they overthink how much a resume is so important. And I think a resume is still needed and is important. But what I want people to listen to this podcast realize, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is that I have yet, and maybe you have, but I have yet met anybody who has gotten a job just because of their resume. Meaning they submitted their resume and the company goes, and the recruiter might go hey, Dominic, we saw your resume. We're super impressed. By the way, we want to onboard you tomorrow.
Right.
It just never happens. It's hey, Dominic, we would love to interview you. And there's a process, but no one is just going to hire you from your resume alone.
Yeah, it's really just a summary of what you've done and your impact at a company. Yeah. So I think as long as that's communicated in a simple way and it's easy to read and you're aligned to the role, you've got a better shot. Or another way I say it is having a bad resume can hurt you, but having a good enough resume is what you need. There's not that much strategy beyond that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's there is this barrier to entry that you need to have. Your resume needs to be to a certain level. If not, you're going to be easily disqualified. But on the other side, your resume could be the best resume and it doesn't guarantee anything. Best case scenario, it gets you the interview, it's the next step. That's great, right? So let me ask you a question. In a world where we have AI, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, right? And the barrier to entry to having a good resume has dramatically been lowered. Where should the job seeker be focusing on?
Or I guess my question is that job seeker trying to do something new or trying to do something similar to what they've done in the past?
Usually, who would you work with? Somebody who's pivoting to a new career, or they're just continuing to climb their corporate ladder?
I've worked with both, but I think just expectations and timelines are different for both. So if you're going into a similar role or maybe just a role above what you're doing right now, I definitely think the people that have gotten the best offers at the best companies has been through networking. So building real relationships with real decision makers through your own network or growing them organically on LinkedIn. that is always more strategic and a better strategy than just submitting a cold application. If you're pivoting careers, my recommendation is to do whatever you can to get that experience, even if it means volunteering to do that, because that's how you're going to prove to the next person that you're capable of doing it.
Like past performance is the best indicator of future performance.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. That's like the bias in a hiring manager's mind is like, is this person going to be able to do the job? And are they going to be somebody I want to work with? So like you have to
Yeah.
answer the two questions during an interview.
I always think about whether you do one round of interviews or 5 rounds of interviews, and let's say each round is 10 questions. So you might get asked 30 to 50 questions. It always comes down to one question. Who is the best investment for the company, right? And when I think about an investment, is like, are you high reward, low risk? And I
Mhm.
think a lot about how the most qualified candidate is rarely the person that gets the job, because a lot of times if you're overqualified, then the odds of you being in that role long enough, they're just might using it as a stepping stone and leave 3 months later. So it's not worth hiring. But if you're dramatically underqualified, you're low risk. You're not gonna leave. Like if you get a job at Google making $3 million and you just graduated high school, I'm sure you're not going to leave that job, but you're not going to be able to do the job. So they're going to fire you. So it's like this like sweet spot of like being able to do the job, being a good performer, but low risk where you're not going to go leave in the first 2 years.
Yeah, and I think the layer I would add onto that is like hiring is still very human. So
Yeah.
think about it, like if you approach your interview like a consultant, then you're going to be going in fact finding about what that hiring manager's wants and needs are, so that you
Hmm.
can position yourself for what they're looking for too.
Yeah.
Because like they may not want someone who's super underqualified or overqualified, so you kind of have to figure out what their ideal person looks like and tell your story so that it lines up with that.
Yeah. You've worked with a lot of job seekers in your career. What would you say are like the pattern recognitions that you have seen from the job seekers that come in and get a job in like 2 to 3 months and get a high increase and are able to negotiate it versus the one that takes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months and ultimately maybe have to like lower their expectations and even get a job that paid them less than they made before?
Yeah, I'd say generally it's the people that I work with. If they if they do what I tell them to do and they follow through on the strategy we agree on or partner on, they'll hit it quicker. That like there's people that I've worked with that great people, we get along great, but they don't apply the way I tell them to. Like at the end of the day, I can't be there with them to do the work. So it's the ones that I usually know within like 1 to 2 sessions too. If they are going to like put in the work to get that next role, it usually happens pretty quickly.
When you say put in the work, what does that work look like? Like what is the activity that a job seeker would need to do to be able to get a job in this market?
Yeah. So once you've figured out like your positioning or like where you want to target, it is about making sure your resume is good enough, your LinkedIn's telling the same story, and then you're strategically networking into companies that are growing. Like, and so that means you kind of do a little bit of everything, right? So like you still need to apply because you could still get a job
Hmm.
from a cold application, but you also want to network because you need to be connecting with people in those companies, especially if it's a Google or an Amazon, like a high tier company, you're definitely going to need to build your network there. So it's not super complicated, but you need to do a certain volume and make it a habit that you're doing each week, and then be consistent and keep the mindset that it's going to work, because usually when people have a good mindset that it's going to work, it ends up working.
Is there anything that is working really well in 2026 that wasn't working well in 2025?
I don't think too much has changed other than like the way I like to work with clients is trying to be like as innovative as possible with how you're networking and outreaching. So, for example, I had a client that he was a surgeon in Venezuela, but because of like reciprocity laws here, he couldn't actually like in
Yeah.
medicine. So he was working as a bartender
Mm.
and also like got his master's of health administration so he could try to break in. So what we did was work on his like elevator pitch so he could just like talk about his background and refine that. But he put himself out there. Like while he was bartending, he kind of like kept sharing a story with people. And ultimately there was a CEO of a healthcare consulting company that he served one night, like with this whole group, and like put himself out there, pitched himself, and they made an internship for him to get started in their company.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, I think it's you put yourself out there as much as you can, but just making sure your messaging is right so that when if you're going to be like doing the awkward work of doing that anyways, at least it's like going towards the goal that you have in mind.
I've seen that a lot with a lot of the career coaches that I've worked with, that in 2026, visibility and is becoming so important, because right now when a company posts a job opening, whether it's LinkedIn, their own website, or even Monster, Indeed, and whatnot, there's so many auto apply tools and people are using that they're getting flooded with applications more than ever. I remember when before AI, the average company would get 200 plus applications. Now Google's and the top tiers will get thousands, but smaller mom and pops might get like 10, 15. But the average is like, I think around 200, 250. And I think I saw that number is like 3x that number now. And I think that the challenge is then visibility. And even for a company, to your point, that there's still a lot of companies that manually want to review every single application. It's becoming more difficult to figure out who to interview, because again, the resumes are all being done through AI, so they all sound good. Like the barrier to entry to have a good resume is not as high anymore. And so then you're gonna have to do a little bit more screenings to be able to figure out who do you want to put in front of the hiring manager or move on to that. And what I am hearing from recruiters that are actively recruiting in the day to day is that they're relying more on outbound than they are waiting for the inbound. Like they're like, even I seen LinkedIn has a feature now that literally says like, this company wants to talk to you, and that's becoming more common. And so part of the strategies that are working the most to get a job in 2026 is treating the job seeker yourself as a personal brand on LinkedIn, and creating content or commenting on the recruiter's post. And that's leading to tons of inbound, which leads to more interviews and even just dramatically more offers.
Yeah, I've seen clients that didn't have a good LinkedIn or like it was like didn't have
Yeah.
anything and then they branded it properly and then they were getting inbounds from that. To me, I still put that in the bucket of like your resume has to be good enough to like do what it's supposed to do. Your
Yes.
LinkedIn has to be good enough to do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't
Yes.
guarantee that you're going to get a reach out from that. And like, I don't think anybody has to become like a thought leader in the space necessarily to
Mm-hmm.
get the value out of LinkedIn, but it's like you could do a couple posts, but as long as like your landing page or like your bio page is communicating what you're good at, that's that's usually the first step in getting some traction.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's about them being a thought leader and posting once a day. Like, but I do, what we found is posting it once a week, because most people don't post on LinkedIn. And it's not posting about here's how much I know, but it could just be like, let's say that you're a civil engineer and or a structural engineer, and you see what happened in the earthquake in Colombia, and then you give your thoughts on like why buildings it's like you, there's a thoughtful way of doing it. What I'm trying to say is like it, but the LinkedIn algorithm will reward kind of like SEO, and
Hmm.
get you in front of more recruiters. Because I think one thing that the LinkedIn it's gotten a lot better in this year than before is intent. Like it's been better at putting you in front of the right people. Even if less people are viewing your stuff, the right people are viewing your stuff. And that also
Yeah.
includes recruiters to job seekers.
Yeah. So that, to your point, like that would be like posting, yes, but also like you should be connecting with the recruiters and the people in your industry on
Yeah,
there that you want to see your stuff.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
like that's like the proactive piece I would do every week.
Yeah. And I would say that's where I think when job seekers that don't work with a career coach fall short the most. I don't think that just working with a career coach to do your resume is like the value proposition. I think yes, I think somebody that has experience to do your resume for you is going to be better than you doing it yourself. Like right, but I think that the value proposition is those outbound strategies, those networking strategies, that visibility strategies that you simply wouldn't know if you're not working with someone who's been there, done that, and has hundreds of other job seekers to see the pattern recognition of what's working and not working in the market.
Yeah, I think like the other experience point is like you kind of have like as you work with more people, a gut sense of what's working and what's not. So you can
Yeah.
kind of guide them to be like, hey, let's pivot strategy slightly, or like let's pick a different job category because like based off what you're doing, you should be getting traction doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of like another client I was working with on LinkedIn, just like outreaching, messaging people. He had messaged somebody that he thought was going to respond to him. The guy wasn't responsive, so like he was getting like down on himself about that. Until like a month later, the guy responded back. I was like, of course, like that guy's probably not on LinkedIn all the day, so you just have
Yeah.
like a good sounding board to be like, no, you're not going crazy. Like it's these things take time. You don't know when they're gonna hit and like move forward. So it's also like the mindset of someone who does it. Like I'm very confident when I'm like, no, this stuff will work eventually. You just have to like trust the process.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to trust the process when you're working with someone that can be like, here's examples of A, B, and C, someone doing it, versus when you're doing it yourself and you're a job seeker and you're by yourself applying, and this is a mental game, and you get rejected or you get ghosted and you're not hearing back. And you're getting this desperation of like, I got to get a job. Like I have bills, like I have my family to support. And that then leads to a lot of times underemployment. And I think to me, that's the part that really breaks my heart is like seeing people just settle for something less because they just don't have either somebody guiding you to say like, you're this close. Like, I know it feels like you're far away. You're this close. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, maybe it could be underemployment's like what they need to build their confidence back up. And like it could just be a phase. And like now that you're in a more stable position, now you can really go after what you want. So I don't necessarily think of it as like a loss either. It's like what was meant to happen at the time. And so I don't think people should feel bad about having to do that.
I don't think that they feel like because they might not know what other opportunities are available. Right. I guess for
Yeah.
me is it's that because if you're a job seeker doing this by yourself and you only see this from your career path, like you just all you do is like you hear the news of all layouts and layouts and layouts, you just feel like you're like going against the current. Versus I think if you had a guide who's has a more pattern recognitions that has already gone through this journey with so many people, then I can be like, hey Dominic, I know it feels like this is going to be impossible, but you're getting traction. Like look how your application to interview ratio is like 20%. Look how you're actually getting coffee chats or networking sessions. Like my experience, you might only be about a month away from getting a job, but in their head is like this is never going to happen.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say is like a good conversion rate in this market for most people is around like 3 to 4%. So that means that they're getting, if you're doing like just cold applications, you're getting like 96 rejections for or
Yep.
ghosts for every single like interview. So there's really no way you can't internalize failure when that's happening. And so it's good to have that person be like, no, actually, you're like in the top 10% qualified people I've worked with. So it's like, it's good to, I've seen people be like down on themselves. Like, no, actually, like I work with people all the time and you're qualified for what you're going after.
Yeah. I know. Exactly. Exactly. Dominic, tell us a little bit more about how you work with clients and who do you work with?
Yeah. So I work with primarily mid to senior professionals. So think if you've had, 4 to 5 years in your existing role and you're just like either getting stuck or you've got like that, maybe that pit in your stomach where you're like, it's like, I don't think things are going to keep growing at my company. Like that's usually is the best time to start being proactive before you get desperate. And what I like to do is think about your job search as a funnel, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
you think about the top of the funnel as like where your applications are going in. And I think about it systematically as like, where are you getting stuck in that funnel? So are you typically getting past first round interviews, but not going beyond that? Okay, well, we need to look at your like behavioral questions and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think about optimizing your job search. And so I help you troubleshoot it. And then we work on that first. And then we can also take a look at your full job search strategy and make sure you're good end to end.
Yeah. I love the fact that you think about it from like the funnel, like then it's kind of like a sales process, even though the product is you're selling yourself, because having that data of information like, okay, it's going to take this many applications to get this many interviews. It's going to take this many interviews to get this, to get the offer or to get multiple offers so that you have a little bit more leverage. And that also like helps create a path. Not that the path is going to be easy. It's still a challenging job market, but at least there is like a proven systematic way that if I do the right input, we'll get the desired output.
Yeah, 100%. It's even like, okay, so we know it's going to take about 1,000 applications if you're just doing cold applications. Great. How do you want to get to that volume and how do you want to optimize within that
Yeah.
space? Uh,
Yeah.
so
Awesome. Dominic, if people want to learn more about you and connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
they can either find me on LinkedIn under Dominic Brocco or go to careerdomain.ai. And that's my main website. So you'll see more about my program. And yeah, don't be afraid to
Yeah.
shoot me a message. I'm happy to respond.
Awesome. I'll also put your website and your LinkedIn on the show notes. So if anybody listening wanted to just be one click away to get to know a little bit more about Dominic's work. But Dominic, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you. Thanks for sharing your advice to job seekers. And job seekers, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
All right. Thanks.
Awesome. Alrighty, we can stop recording.